Test that out before we get rolling. Pull it up and make sure it's working. Okay, we are live.
Yeah.
All right, it's working. Perfect.
Awesome.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Meltdown Show. Casey, it has been months since we stayed up late and pontificated on all things college football, particularly A&M. And welcome back. Glad to have you. I know you're doing some social.
Yeah, got to do a little social.
You're on the social.
But yeah, welcome back. Fighting Texas Aggie off season. It's been an exciting couple of weeks, and that's what's prompted us to do the show.
Yes.
We've got recruiting kicking off in a big way. Kids are actually back on campuses. So
for
that's
2
cool.
weekends in a row.
Yeah.
Third one upcoming tomorrow.
Yeah. But the big news that got everyone talking was we got some stuff from the College Football Playoff Committee.
Yeah.
Subcommittee, whatever.
A subcommittee to fix their mistakes. And my goodness, they did. They came out with some huge news. They unveiled a proposal that will be voted on this fall by the presidents of the university, is what I understand, ultimately. And the proposal is a 12-team playoff. 12. We were hoping for...
Personally hoping for 8.
8.
With no auto bids whatsoever.
Well, this is going to be quite controversial for you then, won't it? So we were hoping for 8. We'd both talked about that back in the fall. We landed on 12, and we do have some automatic bids for conference champions. The top 6
ranked conference champions.
Yep.
So, and they did that to, appease opponents of playoff expansion, I think. But I think we can get to that, later. But yeah, essentially it's 12 with 4 byes and 8 teams that are going to have to play in the first round.
Yep.
What do we say? The top 6 conference champions in the college football playoff rankings. Is that correct?
In the rankings. Right. That's right. The top 4 get the top 4 seeds.
Yes.
So you
top 4 conference champions.
Top 4 conference champions. They get a first round bye.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important because it's kind of what that does is that kind of locks in the existing structure somewhat. Right? You got to win your conference.
Mm-hmm.
There's a benefit to it. You get a much easier path. Much easier. I guess that's debatable, isn't it? But,
yeah,
one having to play number 5 later on, that's not necessarily an easier path because one would used to play number 4. Right. So let's assume anyway, it probably wouldn't work out that way. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Well, in theory, one's going to play 8.
Yes. One would play 8.
Yeah.
Yes. If chalk. Yeah.
If the chalk holds, one would play 8 and
at worst.
Yeah. And 4 would play 5.
That's right. So, see, we're getting lost in all of this anyway.
Yeah. But it is an interesting system because I think you and I were both in agreement. We wanted 8, no auto bids, because we figured that would actually just put us in the same situation we have now because you would force a crappy Pac-12 team in and then put some auto bid in for a crappy G5 team that doesn't really have a chance. And we didn't really like that. You'd end up with maybe an outside chance of even in 2020, a school like A&M getting in. 16 felt like too many, and nobody really wanted to see one play 16.
I think that's right. Now I want to go back to the idea that around auto bids, and you didn't really like auto bids. I wasn't all that opposed to them, to be honest, because you look at the landscape today and you can easily say, well, this conference doesn't deserve to be in or this one doesn't deserve to be in. But that perception tends to play out over multiple seasons, right? There's like a built-in sort of bias against certain conferences, I think, when it comes to the rankings. And I think there are times where maybe a conference is a little better than people expected it to be or worse than it expected to be. And I kind of think back to the Big Ten last year, right? Like, they didn't play a lot of games, but they kind of got the benefit of the doubt historically. And I think that's got to play itself both ways, ultimately. And I think for the sport to be as healthy as possible over the long term, that I think getting these other conferences, as much as I'm now an SEC homer, I do think in the long term it's probably better that you widen the access a little bit from a conference standpoint. But I do think they struck the right balance, right? Because now you've got enough teams and enough at large to where the conferences that are just kicking butt and have all the talent and wipe the floor throughout the regular season and out of conference are also going to get teams in. Multiple teams in.
Multiple teams. And in fact, if you look at the way this would have played out in 2020, the SEC would have had 4 teams in. And I think a high likelihood of all 3 at-large SEC teams advancing. You would have had Georgia Cincy again. I think Georgia wins that by an even larger margin if they do it.
Georgia at full strength.
Georgia at full strength.
Presumably.
Yeah. You had A&M, Indiana. Obviously, I think A&M wins that. And then you had Florida, Iowa State. And I think full-strength Florida that's engaged just mops the floor with Iowa State. So then you end up with 4 teams in the next round of 8 from the SEC. So, but to your point, I don't know. I think as seasons go on and you get to see more of these matchups that I think people want to see, interconference things to maybe settle some of these arguments that we love to have on Twitter all the time about which conference supremacy. You will see more seats at the table or less. Like you'll see that ebb and flow of conference reputation. It'll be interesting.
So, and maybe this isn't the right time to pivot to this, but I want to do it anyway. Regular season. There's been a ton of talk about the regular season in college football and the value of the regular season. And a lot of the folks who were even opposed to the 4-team playoff back when it was the AP poll or the BCS didn't want anybody else at the table because they said that the college football had the greatest regular season going in sports. Now, most of those folks were fans of teams who tended to have access, always were in the top 5 or whatever. And I think you and I are probably both in agreement that this does not devalue the regular season. In fact,
no, I don't think it does at all. And frankly, I get sick of watching this argument unfold places because I feel like what ends up happening is people constantly argue past each other because when they talk about it, they're not really talking about the same thing. I think disagreements about expansion largely boiled down to 2 things. Putting a different value on the regular season, valuing different things about the regular season, and disagreeing about what we're really trying to do in crowning a champion. So, and the regular season thing was really the biggest microcosm of that. It's people constantly saying, well, this is the best regular season and it's going to devalue it. And everyone just saying, no, it's going to make it better, and not realizing they're talking about actually different things. Because no, I say unequivocally, no, it will not devalue the regular season. Stop saying that. What you mean to say is that it will change an aspect of the regular season that you value.
Yes.
But I don't value at all. Right. And in fact, I will be very happy to see that aspect of college football go away.
Which is?
This supposedly high-value regular season, which really just means as the season goes on, 3 or 4 teams actually have meaningful games remaining on their schedule.
Well, it's the chasing of the perfection.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And we're holding as the season goes on, a smaller group of teams to a standard that some people value.
Sure.
Right? And I think where we come at this is you're going to get past the first month of the season where traditionally 3/4 of the teams are out of the race after the first couple of weeks.
Right.
Okay. You're going to get into October and almost everything is still kind of in play. Okay. Because you're coming out of non-con, you're starting to get into conference, and the conference championships are not even remotely decided at that point. And that's going to play out. And then in November, you're still going to have a significant number of teams, far more teams than today, still have the ultimate goal of a season in front of them, right? And so, there's so many teams that go into a season now and say, well, we want to win the national championship. And that dream is dead.
Totally dead.
3 weeks in, sometimes 2 weeks in, or the first game, right?
Yeah.
So that is fundamentally going to change. And I think you're going to have more teams with a hell of a lot more to play for, more players with a hell of a lot more to play for, right? Because you don't see guys opting out of the college football playoff, right? Very rare.
Right.
You did say yet, and I think ultimately you will see it.
Absolutely.
But I think you're going to see more guys opting out of seasons than playoffs. And I think you'll see it go that direction, as opposed to, blood, sweat, and tears. I'm with my teammates. We're trying to get to the end and win the whole thing. And you know what? At some arbitrary point in the season, I'm deciding that's it. I don't think it's going to be for the playoff. I think it'll be either get out of the whole season or, halfway through, I feel like I've put myself in a good enough position. It's going to be interesting to see. But anyway, I can't wait for a significant growth in games that matter. And I think that's what we're going to get.
I think so too. To that point, you're devaluing a handful of games, but you're gaining so much more, I think, on the back end of games that matter. Hell, even the Big 12 championship last year, like that game would have been for seeding in the playoff.
Yeah. Well,
the Pac-12 championship would have been, if USC wins that, they're in.
Right.
But because a mediocre Oregon team won, Pac-12 shut out in this scenario. But I mean, they're in. You would have got to see Coastal, all the people that insist the G5 can compete. Well, we're going to find out.
Yes.
I don't see how any of this is a bad thing, but you brought up an interesting thing a minute ago. You said that chase for perfection. Some people are they're so mired in that old school mentality. And a few of them have even admitted more recently that, they would actually just rather go back to the BCS.
Right.
Which you couldn't really get them to do for a while, but now it's just, we've hammered this point so often. They're just like, I just want the BCS. I want the top two to play. I want them to be undefeated or one loss. And that's just kind of what a real champion is to me. And they say, well, now look at this. There would have been a couple of 3-loss teams in the playoff in 2020 if we'd had this. And what do you want, a 3-loss champion? Yes, I do want a 3-loss champion. Yeah, if they're better than everybody else at the end of the season, then yes. And that's why I said before, we often disagree about what a real champion is. But to me, I want to see the games.
You just don't ever see these guys who claim that, right? Like, 3-loss champion is possible now. That's going to destroy the sport. You never see them when, the Monday after a Super Bowl complaining about the number of losses for the Super Bowl champion, right? Because that team did what they had to do to qualify for the tournament, and were playing their best football at the end of the year. And I will never understand the real opposition to that approach, because what has happened in college football, Division I college football more than any other, is that the need to achieve perfection has it's so severely limited over time, the number of teams that can really pull that off because of recruiting and because of having to stack all those recruiting classes on top of one another to get closer to the possibility of achieving perfection. And I think what you are going to start to see is you're going to start to see somebody go out and, maybe they just nail it in one recruiting class. They have no misses. And maybe they got a strong recruiting class that follows that up. They're suddenly going to be in a position to where maybe they start out the year with young talent. And A&M is actually a prime example of this. I even go back to last year. They were one of the youngest. Well, even last year or even 2012. Really young team who, because they didn't have that depth, we're probably going to lose some games early on. But as those young players get better and better at playing college football, they get better as a football team. And at the end of the year, they're just a totally different animal than they were at the start. And even in this year, I mean, taking it back to the Aggies, where did they hit their stride? Where did they figure out who they were? It's against Florida.
Mm-hmm.
It was after the Alabama loss, where that identity came together, and they started running the football downhill. Defense got stronger and stronger, started building depth, and they were a totally different ball club by the end of the year. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that opportunity.
I think so too, and I think you'll be able to see teams like A&M under Jimbo, right, make more meaningful incremental progress towards, because a lot of people say no matter what you're going to do, like Alabama was going to win last year, this isn't going to change the outcome. To which I say, who cares? I want to see the games, right? Make them prove it.
Yeah,
but whatever. But like you said, it's such a narrow thing to try and get this, like, be one of these 1 or 2 undefeated teams at the end of the season. And if you're a 3-loss team, like, what are you? What are you able to really show at the end of the year? What does that season really mean? And if you're a team that's trying to get into that upper tier, it's, I think, almost impossible to really sustain momentum. But if you can show that, you're getting into that top 12, you had a good year, like, I've really been able to build a program, even like what they're doing at Iowa State, I think that helps chip away at this concentration of talent that just keeps going to like 1 or 2 schools.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And a lot of people have been making that argument for the playoff expansion. I think they're making it a little too hard. I don't think it's going to be a massive change on that front, but I do think it will chip away at that.
Well, and I think we need to pivot into who benefits from this and why. And so you brought up the Iowa State example, and I think that's really important because I think my opinion is that strong conferences are going to benefit in the short term. Okay, the SEC, the talent is there. The dedication of resources, time, money, everything, energy, the focus of those institutions is the culture is so strong that I think you're going to go into this thing and, like you said earlier, you're going to end up with 4, maybe even some years 5 teams in this deal. It's certainly possible. We've seen it with the way the rankings have shaken out before. I don't know if that really is sustainable long term. You really never know, right? I mean, these things ebbed and flowed over time, but we'll see. But there are other conferences where I think this impact is going to be felt, and we'll use the Big 12, and I'm going to ignore little brother in Austin, okay, for now, and I'm going to focus on Oklahoma because Oklahoma has dominated the Big 12 for a while, right?
You want to talk about top heavy? What they accuse the SEC of
the ultimate top heavy conference, okay. Mm-hmm. So Oklahoma wins the Big 12 repeatedly and has been in the college football playoffs several times now. They don't show up very well there, okay, for the most part. But they have been able to sell within that conference and within their recruiting landscape of, you come here, okay, we win the Big 12. We have the opportunity to go to the college football playoff. That's what differentiates them now more than anything else. It was a very different world in the Big 8 and even in the early days of the Big 12, where you had some really strong teams, and then OU, really kind of matched those teams. And the Nebraskas, the occasional A&M, and the Longhorns. Mm-hmm. But now I think the teams like Iowa State, even occasionally Kansas State, who always seems to kind of punch a little bit above their weight, certainly above their talent.
Sure.
Maybe not without Bill Snyder anymore, but it still seems to happen every once in a while. Or even a Baylor with the right coach can now sell something that they couldn't sell before, not realistically, which is, hey guys, come here. Mm-hmm. We don't even necessarily have to win the conference, but we have to perform well enough to get into the tournament. Getting into the tournament is a game changer for those teams.
I think they would have got in twice over the last 10 seasons.
That's right.
TCU at least once, because they narrowly missed out already. I think it would absolutely play out that way for them. and make a huge impact to their recruiting.
And I think that is a threat to Oklahoma and the other school down 35 that they haven't had to really face. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how that plays out in what I would call they're Power 5 conferences, but they're not the most powerful. I think you've got the SEC and you've got the Big Ten, part of the Big Ten, who are pretty strong.
Yeah.
But I think these other conferences, including the Pac-12, that, some of these teams are going to close the gap to the traditional powers in their conference. And I don't think that's not like an overall. I think the traditional powers come down, and the mid-tier teams in those conferences might close that gap. It's just gonna be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, you didn't mention the ACC in that at all, which I find it's a very interesting. I don't know what to make of it based on what you just said. I mean, because are they the ultimate top-heavy conference? Maybe even more so than the Big 12.
Well, it really depends on what Notre Dame ultimately decides to do long term,
right?
Because Notre Dame is in a very awkward position under this scheme, right?
Yeah, I lost my mind earlier this week, so we have to touch on that because obviously we were losing our minds back in December when the playoff rankings came out, and I'm continually flabbergasted that people continue to be conned by those stupid gold helmets.
Yes.
And it just never seems to work when they get the brake speed off of them. Then I think that's the last year that people will buy it, and it's not. But after all of that's happened over the last 10 years or so, there was still a huge contingent of people who were mad when this proposal came out, because only conference champions are eligible for a bye. And that means Notre Dame wouldn't be able to get a bye.
Right.
Not, oh no, this will hurt Notre Dame's chances of having one of their crappy, fraudulent teams get in the playoff.
No.
They won't get a bye.
Wow. So, that's really sad.
It's so sad.
Yeah. So pony up and go join the ACC permanently if that's really what you got to have. But yeah, that is a disgusting argument based on their recent performance. So
it never ends.
So
and that is what's wrong.
Absolutely,
only having 4 teams, because that team continues to get such the benefit of the doubt for no reason at all. We can't keep going on like this with 4 teams.
Right.
So
I think I'm kind of projecting ahead to the future, which unfortunately it sounds like the earliest we get this is 2023. So we're at least 2 more full seasons under the current 4-team playoff, which is going to be amazing to listen to all the commentary as that plays itself out.
Sure.
And there'll be a hell of a lot more talk about who's left out and what this type of proposal will look like, which is why I think the College Football Committee announced it now. I think that was smart. It sort of bakes it into our psyche and consciousness between now and fall, like as if it's a done deal. If they went out and voted this thing down, there'd be just hell to pay. I think in some ways people would be so angry that maybe they live off of that. I don't know, but projecting ahead, how big of a deal is it to be in the 5 to 8 spot in this deal? Like you would obviously want to buy.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that the teams that get the buy don't ever play at home.
No. I mean, that's all I could think about when this came out. I was like, oh my God. In this scenario, what was it? A&M was technically the 6th seed in the way this would work out. A&M at home at night, probably, because surely these will be primetime games in the middle of December at Kyle Field in a playoff
game. Playoff game.
Yeah.
Yeah. With a chance to go to a neutral site in the quarterfinals.
Yep.
Those types of atmospheres are going to be unbelievable.
Yeah. It's almost sad that a school like, Alabama or whatever would miss out on it, but not really. I don't care.
Yeah, it's gonna. I think
you
it's
do
gonna.
want the bye.
You absolutely got to have
Yeah.
it. I think because of the way the seating works and everything else, and that disparity. It's not like the NFL where the best. You don't see a lot of upsets with seating. You see it occasionally, but the talent gap isn't that wide.
Right.
There's going to be a big difference, at least initially, with what you see. Those buys are going to be priceless. But man, I mean, I love what it creates from that standpoint. And one of the other big arguments though is that teams are going to end up playing too many games. They're going to end up playing as many as I think 17 games possible. But I actually thought Bob Bowlesby had a really good point. The first one he's probably had in 5 or 6 years. But he said the likelihood of a team playing 17 games is almost non-existent because you would basically have to play in your conference championship game, lose your conference championship game, still remain as an at-large, and then you start playing all of those all the way through the extra games and win all of those games to end up playing 17. So, the odds of a lower seed of that happening is extremely limited. Mm-hmm. So with the buys from the top seeds, you're probably going to end up somewhere in like the 15 game season, which is what we've seen in recent history anyway.
Yeah. And by the way, if you do make your conference championship game, lose it, and then run through the playoff, you're going to be more than happy to have played those 17 games.
Right.
So, or make it to the final at least. I mean, yeah.
And you got like 100 players. So, it's not like being in the NFL where you have a much smaller roster. And we see high school teams do this all the time. In the state of Texas, they're playing 15, 16 games in a season. Easy. If they make it all the way through the playoffs. So it's
about the kids.
Anyway, I don't know what the hell it's about anymore, but I'm just looking forward to getting some better football. So I don't know, man. College football playoff, 12 teams. I wish it was going to be here now. I'd love to see it play out.
I wish it was here last year. I mean, what exactly is stopping them?
Yeah,
I don't precisely know. Be specific, because we made the COVID season happen in 6 weeks.
Right.
So
that was a huge thing for me last year is we've moved heaven and earth to make things happen that have never happened before. But we created this mess with the Ohio States of the world, and we just couldn't figure out a way to one-time deal. We make a playoff. We expand this group, and we call it a COVID year, and shake things up a bit. It just didn't make any sense. It seemed like the perfect opportunity, but again, I don't know what the real pull and the power structure looks like behind the scenes from bowls, university presidents, TV. Why there's so many people that seem to have been invested in not keeping it exclusive.
The only thing I can think is that ESPN wants a couple of years to try and sock away the money it's going to take to get the rights to this, because I just don't understand this. To me, it just seems like there's a huge pile of money involved that everyone's going to benefit from.
So many buckets of money.
That's the biggest thing I don't get about this. They're steering a battleship for some reason. It seems silly.
By the way, this spot brought to you by Wake 'em Up, whatever, Leon O'Neal.
Oh, man. Dude, he is all in. He is going to get his name, image, likeness money.
Oh, my gosh. What a mess that's about to be.
Oh, man.
I
hope he's majoring in marketing.
Yeah, all these guys. I saw high school recruits who were pretty excited today and already started to talk about their merch stores. So, it's a disaster. It's probably actually much bigger news than even the 12 team playoff.
Much bigger.
But it makes my head hurt so bad, and I really don't want to think about the implications of it So I've sort of limited my ability to engage and try to figure out what the hell this actually means.
Yeah, guilty. I'm the exact same way. So it does feel like a much bigger kind of sea change coming.
Yeah.
I think in general, whenever people have talked about paying players and all of that, there are way more downstream effects than anybody realizes, and nobody wants to talk about it.
Right.
And sounds like we don't want to talk about it either.
We don't want to talk about it either.
Yeah.
But you know what? Here's something I do want to talk about. Okay. Because we are in full-on off-season mode because right now, Twitter is unbearable.
It is unbearable.
It's unbearable. Maybe we can spend 5 minutes, but man, the crazies are coming out.
Oh, yeah.
We kind of had a run of Texas Tech Twitter. Now and then OU Twitter. And now, the horns they're out. They're out and about. Now, I'm not seeing them out and about on the streets.
No.
I don't remember the last time I saw a burnt
clothing.
orange shirt in Walmart, even, which is surprising.
On a clearance rack.
As I drive by Walmart.
Yeah, right.
On my way to Target. Anyway, we're never getting sponsored by Walmart. But seriously, what the hell is going on out there?
Dude, it is bizarre. When they first hired Sark, we were getting a sprinkling of optimism,
new toy,
and look what Sark did at Alabama. Like, we basically won the Heisman, and we all kind of joked about it.
We thought it was funny.
We thought it was funny. We were like, they basically won a Heisman now, right?
Right.
Yeah, and we had like one information tweet or whatever when we hired Jimbo that had like, what was it, like Jalen Ramsey or something?
Yeah, all the players he pushed into the NFL.
Yeah, whatever.
As the head coach, right? Okay.
Of a program that was his
program,
right?
Yes.
And won a title as a head coach.
Yes.
Anyway, right?
Known for producing NFL talent.
And they were like, we're like, oh, they won a Heisman. It's all a joke. But then they went to 11 with it.
They did.
And they haven't stopped.
They built an entire marketing campaign around. We're basically basically Bama.
Alabama now. I thought you had the tweet of the week, and I feel like it's not appreciated enough at all. Like with one of their little marketing tweets from the athletic department, like, why don't you guys just put them in Alabama jerseys?
Yeah, they got all these recruits coming in front of
let them wear Alabama jerseys
in front of their old Western. I don't know what the
Novarakes sign.
Yeah, Novarakes. And they're running these recruits out in front of these barrels and old stage lights and
whiskey barrels. A good
idea. They are all in their UT uniforms. Why don't we just let them wear some Bama uniforms?
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? It'll probably make them feel better.
Yeah.
So I'm not done with that. I'm not done with that line. I think we're going to get a little bit more mileage out of that over the next couple of weeks when I get into some Photoshop. We'll see what we can do there every time a recruit posts a picture. But holy smokes. The coaches, everything, and stupid slogans. Everything from that marketing department feels so forced. But anyway, we're really talking about the fans because the Horn fans seem to be all in on it, man.
Oh, man.
They're all over this.
All in. Optimism is extreme.
Right. Optimism is extreme. And here's how you know is because all of the stupid old arguments that are competing with one another for lunacy, they're coming out of the woodwork, man. So, A&M will never compete in the SEC.
Right.
You never won a title. Things went well. Well, now the SEC must be overrated.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't quite work out for them either.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And we need football games to get in.
We need football games real bad. My wife needs football games to happen so that I will stop talking to her about football and we'll actually just watch football.
Fair enough.
No, they're what was the one that Austin better than College Station. Like, they're still so happy about that one. It cracks me up. It's gotten worse as they tweet out the pictures of the really cool stuff in Austin that the kids are doing. Like they had gummy bears or something. I don't know. In their awesome hotel that they had to drive by 6 homeless encampments to get to the campus on their way.
These are people who've never been to a college town, it seems.
No.
So, they would never bring themselves to drive out to College Station or Tuscaloosa or Gainesville or Auburn or Athens. It's as if it never, or Norman for that matter.
Yeah.
Norman, Oklahoma, great college town. Austin is not a college town. It is a town, a city with a college in the middle of it. And, they think that's really special, but I don't think they really understand the entire concept. So it's okay. I'm all here. I'm here for it. I love it.
I think we're going to get many, many more weeks of it.
I think we are too.
Yeah.
And
so that's good.
The heat's going to get to them down there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's getting to me up here.
Absolutely. I think that's it, man. That's college football playoff expansion talk. And, after the hell we went through from a technical perspective, trying to get this thing rolling, I'm just glad we knocked it out. Yeah. And we'll be back in a few weeks. I have a feeling in about 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to have a lot to talk about from a recruiting standpoint. Mm-hmm. And it's all going to be good.
All of it.
So, we're not the recruiting experts. We definitely keep up with it religiously. But if we were being honest, we're regurgitating a lot of information we get from other people.
Sure.
But we can at least celebrate, and I think we're gonna have some things to celebrate.
I think so too.
All right, guys, we're out. Awkward.